Back to Miller. Oh, my goodness.
Herbert, sidearm sling, and it's a touchdown.
Tyrese Maxey.
Oh, good spin move by Filipowski for the news. Give him 9.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Beef Up Front podcast here on Pick Swap Media. As always, your host, Ryan Coyle, joined alongside Joe Kmetz for our weekly college football show, the Week 2 edition, our third show already of the season. We kind of wait all summer to get back into this, and here we are already the third week, even though it's only Week 2, whatever that means. But at the same time, a pretty chaotic Week 1. We saw a lot of things that were unexpected, and like you always say, Joe, you root for the chaos, and that's what you got. So give me your quick thoughts on Week 1, and welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me on, as always, Coyle. And yeah, chaos for sure, especially Monday night. The second straight week, I think I'm going to say this, but I've never been more wrong about a game than I was about Clemson Duke. Coyle, you were all over Duke. Spread was a lock. You were saying they were on outright. They were going to win outright. To sprinkle that, kind of similar to your South Carolina game last year. It was all over social media. You calling it so. Shout out you, because you had it spot on. I was the opposite. And there were so many times in that game where it seemed like Clemson was about to take control, and then they just inexplicably – the back-to-back fumbles in the red zone was insane to me. I was watching, kind of half watching that game, kind of just laying in bed, on my phone. And it'd be all right, Clemson first and goal. I'd look at my phone. All of a sudden, I'd look up. I'm like, there's no way. It just kept happening. It was insane. I mean, this is going to sound a little crazy, but the way Clemson fans are, expecting national titles, and Dabo's refusal to use the transfer portal. I know, we're not really a recap show, but I'm just kind of getting this out there. I'm not saying Dabo will get fired, but if you all of a sudden see in the offseason that Dabo is going to be interviewing elsewhere, or maybe has interest going somewhere else, don't be surprised, because if he keeps refusing to use the transfer portal, it almost gets to the point where the game is going to pass him by, and Clemson's going to have the choice of either sticking with him, and he's going to keep doing this with the offense. DJ looked great. I know it was against San Jose State, when he was with Oregon State, but DJ looked good. It kind of, after 1 week, he's not the problem. Obviously, there's a whole season left. Clemson could turn it around and finish 11-1 and get a rematch with Duke in the ACC title game at this point. So who knows what's going to happen, but all I'm saying is that was a very alarming Week 1 performance from Clemson.
Yeah, I could see kind of like Jimbo did with Florida State and going to Texas A&M, maybe pivoting to a different program like that. It's one of those things where his time there might be up. But as you were saying too, we could just be completely overreacting, and we could look up and they're back in the ACC championship game again. Because they had so many, I know they didn't execute well, but they had so many opportunities down in the red zone where they were just coughing the ball up. I mean, they played, I think, better football throughout the game. They just made the big mistakes, and they weren't able to fully capitalize on the one punt return that Duke muffed, and then Clemson went in and scored. But it felt like after that, the game kind of flipped on its head, where it was Clemson's to lose, and they were dominating, moving the ball down the field, and then missed field goals, fumbles in the red zone. So it kind of just all collapsed and fell apart. But I thought Duke was really impressive as well. The defense really impressed me. And then Riley Leonard, guy used to play basketball a lot, he was really impressive too as well. So outside of Duke, obviously the other big one is Colorado. We won't touch on that too much because we're going to be talking about them today. But that was a hell of a game, and it's going to be kind of hard to get a better noon kickoff game each and every week, because that had me on the edge of my seat. That was the prime time 3:30 in the afternoon SEC game. That was an awesome game and way to kick off college football Saturdays going forward. So we'll get into Week 2 now. Before that, just recap our records from Week 1. I had a strong week after a bit of a down week in Week 0, where I went 10-11 total. You went 14-7. You had a stronger week 0. I came back last week and had a nice week, going 12-6 total, 4-2 straight up with our predictions, 4-2 against the spread, and 4-2 with our totals. 0-1 on the dog of the day and 0-1 on the lock of the week. Joe, you had a bit of a down week after a strong 14-7 week 0. You went 6-12 last week, going 3-3 on the straight up, 0-6 against the spread. So the auto fade there on the spread.
So bad.
3-3 on the totals, 1-0 on your lock of the week, and 0-1 on your dog of the day. But it's a new week and time to make some picks now. That would have been a funny little parlay if you reverse faded yourself. You'd probably have a little bit of nice coin working for yourself right now. All right, we'll go to starting on Friday night this week. We started on Thursday last week, but this Thursday we got the NFL kickoff, so we won't be getting that many Thursday night games going forward. But we do have a nice little Friday night game, and it's not a ranked matchup, but two programs that had really strong years last year, and they were kind of out of the blue, I think you could say a little bit. We have Big Ten team in Illinois traveling to a Big 12 team in Kansas. Kansas is -3 in this one at home, over under 56.5. 7:30 kickoff on ESPN2. Joe, what are your thoughts on this game?
First things first, I am determined to bounce back this week. I have 26-4 in me from the college basketball season. I will get back to that because 6-12 is just brutal. So to start off the get back, I'm taking Kansas here, 31-20. I think Kansas, I believe Jalen Daniels is coming back this week. I know, he missed last week with, I believe it was like back soreness or something. I mean, there's no need to play him against Missouri State, if you're confident you're going to win that game, which is funny because Kansas a couple of years ago would not be confident against any team in the country. So it's good, they looked fine with the backup, and Jason Bean isn't a slouch. He's the backup. He came in last year when Daniels got hurt. And Illinois, didn't look great, obviously. They needed a game-winning field goal to beat my dog of the day in Toledo. So, that isn't kind of a great look for them. They're a typical, Brett Bielema team, though. They're going to control the clock. They're going to suffocate the ball, run the air out of the ball. They're going to run the ball well. They're going to try not to commit a lot of turnovers, kind of like we've seen Bielema at Wisconsin in the past. And, that can equate into them scoring 45 points with a bunch of rushing touchdowns or winning games 14-7 or needing a field goal and winning 30-29 against Toledo. And they failed to control the time of possession. Toledo had the ball more than Illinois. And that is kind of one of the reasons why Toledo should have won the game. If Illinois can't do that against Kansas, this could be a long night for the Illini. So I'm going to take Kansas pretty comfortably here. I'll take them -3, under 56.5. I think it's going to be a pretty good start for the Jayhawks, getting a good Friday night game. Them getting the extra day rest as well is huge. So give me the Jayhawks here.
I'll go Kansas as well, 33-27 in this one. So I'll take Kansas -3, over 56.5 in here. As you were touching on with Daniels, he was one of the more electric players in college football last year. When Kansas got off to that 4-0, 5-0 start, whatever it was, he was right there in the mix at the top of the Heisman race. And then as it kind of sputtered down the stretch, his name started to fade. But don't let that take away the great season that he had. And with him back now, another year experience, going into another year, being the full-time starter, I think he's in for a big year, and he could potentially be like the Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year, depending on how those other top-tier quarterbacks and Quinn Ewers and Dylan Gabriel kind of go on throughout the year. Kansas was 4-2 last year at home, though, and they should have a pretty packed house in this one. Friday night, national TV. They're going to be the watched game as we kind of lead into another great Saturday of college football. But Illinois last year, a bit concerning from their performance from last year, one of the best defenses in the country. If you looked at pretty much all the metrics, they were right up there in most statistical categories with Georgia. They really struggled against Toledo, like you said, needed that last-second field goal to win the game. They allowed 186 yards on the ground to a team out of the MAC. That's not something that looks promising going forward when you're going to have to play the Big Ten and the likes of Michigan, Penn State, teams like that. They're going to really be able to run the football this year. I think Kansas could run on this defense, especially with that added dimension of Daniels coming back now. He's not a guy that's going to run for 100, 150 yards, but he does just have the legs and the ability to harm the Illinois defense on the ground in this one. He had 7 rushing touchdowns last year. So I think it's going to be a good game that kind of give Jalen Daniels the ability to showcase his game in prime time and kind of reemerge back into the college football scene. And the quarterbacks this year are just going to be so good in college football. He might be a guy that kind of gets lost in the shuffle, but I think he's one of the more fascinating and electric players, and it'll be a great opportunity for him to remind people that on Friday night. All right, we transition to Saturday now. The story of the college football world. It was just an insane game. Did TCU really deserve to be a 20.5 point favorite or 21 point favorite, whatever they closed at? That's an argument for a different day. But Colorado, just the way that they went out there and performed was awesome. And now they find themselves ranked after some people saying that they might not win a game against, a Power 5 team all season, maybe just sprinkle out a win or two against some of those non-con games. But here they are in position to make a run at something now, being a ranked team. They are hosting Nebraska. Colorado is now number 22 in the country. They are a 3-point favorite here. Over under is 58. 12 o'clock kickoff on Fox once again. So they're going to be the first game everyone's got eyeballs on. And I think they might be able to kind of break the trend of people like, maybe I'll sleep through it and kind of roll out of bed closer to these 3:30 games. People are going to be up wanting to watch Colorado football for as many times as they're on this noon kickoff going forward.
Yeah, beef, 100%. That's why I'm actually going to take Colorado 38-30. I'll take them to cover that -3. I'll take the over in this game as well at 58. But I will say I kind of hate the pick just because it seems like everybody in the country is going to be on Colorado. I saw on Twitter there's more action on Colorado spread than any other college or NFL team for the NFL Week 1. Any other team, this is the game I saw. It might be one of the most bet regular season games of all time. It's going to shatter, like I believe it was last year, Tennessee at Georgia, when everyone was taking Tennessee to cover. Georgia ended up covering that spread. Obviously, two completely different teams. I'm not trying to compare either one of these teams to them. But I can't really pick against the Buffs. It would just honestly be disrespectful because their offense is legit. They showed up against TCU. This is a very good test for Deion, though, to see if he can keep his guys focused after such a big win. Because, at the end of the day, people could say, should TCU have been a big favorite? Not, who knows? They were the runner-up in college football last year. Yes, they lost 65-7, but they still got to the national title game. That means something in game 1 for a Colorado team that was 1-11 last year. Yes, Deion completely transformed it, with the transfer portal. But that was a huge win for Colorado for a program that had kind of been lost in the shuffle over the past 15 years for the most part. The only thing I'm not 100% sold on yet is the Colorado defense aside from Travis Hunter. Yes, he was fantastic. But TCU did put up 42 points, right? It was 45-42.
Mm-hmm.
TCU still did put up 42 points. Nebraska played one of the most boring primetime games of all time against Minnesota. They managed to lose yet another close game. I don't know how they keep doing it as a program. I still think they'll be able to score a lot more against Colorado. This is going to be a huge game. I think the Colorado fans are going to be going berserk. But at the end of the day, I'm going to take Colorado here, kind of putting it away late. I think it's going to be one of those close games. Nebraska had a pretty similar game against Oklahoma. I think it was 2 years ago now, where the game was sealed with that Oklahoma player basically did like the 360 to pick the ball off. A lot more athletic than I just looked for those watching on the YouTube. But I am going to take Colorado to put it away here late and go to 2-0 under Deion's first year.
Yeah, the buzz that is just coming just around the country. I don't think Colorado football. I remember there's that 130 for 30 on them. It was either back in the 80s or the 90s, but they had that nice little run back then. But outside of then, this has been an irrelevant program for pretty much our entire life, Joe. But I saw that stat too. I had that in my notes where that there's more money being bet on Colorado's spread right now than any of the 32 NFL teams, and that's leading into week 1 of the NFL season. Like, that is unheard of. These things don't happen ever really in college football. But that just goes to show you the entertainment value that they were able to provide for the people week 1. Just crazy how people are like, this team will not finish anywhere near the top. Your top 2 players apparently are guys from the FCS and never played at the FBS level. I'm just really intrigued to see, was that a flash in the pan? I'm not saying that they don't have talented guys on that squad, but if you're going to be counting on Travis Hunter to play 100+ snaps combined both ways, and he's not like the biggest, like strongest looking guy. He's got a pretty kind of like frail frame still. I think he still needs to put on some weight. I don't know how durable he will be over the course of an entire college football season playing both ways. And like you said, it's not FCS anymore. This is FBS. He proved that he can play at that level, but can he sustain that over an entire 12-game season, especially in this Pac-12 that has, as we saw, Bo Nix put up 82 points. Michael Penix put up over 50, I believe it was, on Boise State. You're going to have Caleb Williams. You have all these really good quarterbacks out there. Are you going to be able to compete and stay at the top of your game on both sides of the ball. And that's going to be a really tough task, but something that I don't think we should put past him. I think it was more impressive, though, the Shedeur Sanders performance, Joe. Not an exaggeration. I think that performance was up there, like top 5 performances I've seen from a college football quarterback. 510 yards and 4 touchdowns. And as Dion said, like after the game, we left a lot of meat on the bone. Like if you watched that game, he was putting the ball just where the receiver could get it, and there was a bunch of drops still. This is a typical, though, fall flat game with all the buzz on Colorado, people sprinkling on them to win the national title. I saw they're like 25-1 now, and I feel like everyone and their mother is going to bet on them. I wouldn't be surprised to see come kickoff if like 95% of the public is on them, but I just can't bet against them right now with the buzz around this program. Vegas is going to take a major hit if Colorado does find a way to go out there and win this game and cover this spread. I'll take them to do it, 42-28. So Colorado -3 over 58. But that Nebraska game, as you said, Joe, was a like watching paint dry. It was brutal, and they just completely gave that game away. I don't think they have the horses to compete. If Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter played on offense like they did last week, they'll outscore Nebraska no matter what the circumstance is. But it's going to be pretty crazy if Colorado does find a way to cover the spread, because that is going to be – it already is the most bet game right now on the board. And if they find a way to cover, will be pretty nuts. But I'll go Colorado 42, Nebraska 28. So Colorado -3 and over a 58 there. All right, third game of the week, our group of 5 game. We have a surprise team. Certainly, I thought this one team would pop up on here maybe once or twice this year, but definitely not this first team. Texas State coming off an upset of Baylor, going to UTSA for a 3:30 kick on ESPN+. UTSA is -12 over under 63.5 in this game. What are your thoughts on this matchup, Joe?
So I unfortunately think the Bobcat magic is going to run out very quickly. I'm going to take UTSA 35, Texas State 17. So I'll have UTSA covering the 12. I'm going to take the under of 63.5. I just believe this is a comeback down to earth moment for the Bobcats. I'm not going to pretend like I know a whole lot about them, so my analysis about this game is going to be short. They did embarrass Baylor, which is shocking to me. If you want to talk about probably the most disappointing team, I know fan bases are going to be upset, like Clemson, Florida losing to Utah, LSU losing to Florida State, but Baylor losing to Texas State at home is inexcusable. This was a team 2 years ago that won the Big 12.
And they probably would have been one of our big games of the week this week against Utah.
Yes, shocking. That was a game, obviously, I didn't watch for a second of. I'm not going to pretend like I did, but all of a sudden I get the update on my phone that they lost. I was like, oh, they would lose close. No, they got dominated by Texas State. I hope I'm wrong with this one, actually. I hope Texas State, goes on some miracle run in the Sun Belt. I think they've been bless you. But I am
He's on the truth.
UTSA, though, they did lose a weird low-scoring game to Houston. I thought that was going to be a lot more high-scoring. Obviously, it wasn't, but I feel like the Roadrunners are going to play pissed off here, while the Bobcats are still high off last week, probably still partying right now. I'll give me the Roadrunners. Meet me big.
I'll go UTSA as well. I'm going to take it a little bit closer, 31-27, Texas State +12, under 63.5. Head coach at Texas State, G.J. Kinney, a former NFL backup quarterback, practice squad guy that kind of bounced around. But I have been hearing the past few years that he's a guy to keep an eye out for. He's the next young up and coming offensive mind. Whether he progresses all the way through the college ranks and becomes one of these Power 5 big time coaches, that remains to be seen, or if he's a guy with his NFL background finds his way there. But he's a guy that knows how to coach offensive football, and he showed that against Baylor, as you said, Joe, just a few years ago, was a Big 12 champion. Dave Aranda is supposed to be kind of a defensive mastermind. So this Texas State team shouldn't be ruled out, but I'm going to go with UTSA with the win here at home, 31-27, but I'll take Texas State +12, under 63.5. Major upset. They're going to try and ride that momentum, and UTSA with the close loss to Houston, bit of a gut punch there. But they're an experienced bunch with a quarterback in Frank Harris, who's in his 7th year of college football. He should be in the running for ACC Conference Player of the Year when it's all said and done. But Texas State has former quarterback TJ Finley. He played at Auburn, and I believe he might have played at LSU as well. So he's a guy that's played in the SEC. He's not really going to be phased. He wasn't the most successful player there, but he's not going to be phased by the kind of competition that he's seeing on Texas State's schedule this year. So wouldn't be surprised to see him ride the momentum and give UTSA some fits in this one. But I'm going to go with UTSA at home. The Alamo Dome, never really an easy place to go in and play. But I will take Texas State to cover in this game. All right, we go down south to Miami now with number 23, Texas A&M, traveling to the 1-0 Miami Hurricanes. A&M is a 4-point favorite over under 51, 330 on ABC. I assume this one is going to be a hot one. So take that kind of into the factor as well, where you know how Miami has that sideline dedicated to really screw with the other team on those afternoon games.
Yeah, Coyle. I mean, that is a factor that I definitely didn't think of, but still, I'm going to take A&M here, 28-21. So I'm going to take a minus the 4. I'm going to take the under in this game, under 51. Last year, the Aggies opened up sluggish against a Sam Houston State team that was from the FCS ranks in week 1. I know it was only New Mexico. I'm not trying to say they beat, a great team, but the offense looked like it had a lot more life to open up the season, which is something that, A&M was plagued with last year. Obviously, Miami looked good too, though. I definitely don't want to take away from their win against the other Miami and the Red Hawks. By the way, one of the stupidest quotes of all time from Blaine Gabbert's younger brother, saying that we're going to show him who the real Miami is, and you get demolished like that. I'm not saying win the game, but you could have at least covered the spread. I mean, that was disgusting. But I think this is a big moment for the Aggies, and in a way, the SEC, just because the SEC went 0-3 against the Power 5 competition over the weekend. I know, obviously, Bama and Georgia didn't play, but just throwing that one out there. The embarrassment of last season for the Aggies outweighs that of Miami, and I'm still a sucker for all the talent on this A&M team. Although we did see how that did for me with Clemson, but I think the talent, it has to show up at some point, or else Jimbo Fisher just fooled everybody and bought Jameis Winston to win a national title. I still think somewhere deep down Jimbo is a real good coach, so I'm going to take the Aggies in what I think is going to be a great college football game. Has the potential to maybe be a better game than a game we're going to talk about in a little bit with the other team in Texas.
I think the Aggies should be on upset alert here. I know that they've been a bit underwhelming the past few years, but I think a win here by Miami could really kind of catapult this Miami program under Mario Cristobal. I think he needs this kind of big program type win. And even if it's not against an LSU or an Alabama, it's still against a very talented SEC team in A&M. We'll see what kind of they do throughout the season with that talent that you were talking about, Joe, if they're able to be like a 9-3, 10-2 type of squad, which they should be with that talent and the money that they're paying Jimbo Fisher. But at the end of the day, I think this is a really big possible momentum building win for this Miami program. It was a really ugly game between the two last year, if you remember that one. The Aggies just won 17-9. Both teams won convincingly, though, this year in week 1. So the jury, I think, is still out on how legit either squad is. But I'm going to go with the home upset here with Miami getting the win. I think Miami putting a lot of emphasis on this one. And I think it's something in the back of, I don't know if it's going to be in the players' heads necessarily, but in the coaches' heads. I think this is a kind of one of those games that could help in some recruiting battles. Once you get past those top dogs of like Alabama, Georgia, LSU, Clemson, that are really bringing most of the 5 stars and a lot of the 4 stars, I feel like Miami and Texas A&M are in that next tier of schools that is competing for those 4 and 5 star recruits. It wouldn't surprise me if Miami had a lot of their big time recruits kind of down here at this game. If they're able to go out there, pull out a win, and really show that this program is headed in the right direction, I think it could be a huge building block for them. So I'm going to take Miami in a close one at home, but I think this is really a coin flip game. Wouldn't surprise me to see it be like a buzzer beater field goal. So I'm going to go Miami 23, Texas A&M 20, Miami +4 and under a 51 here. All right, Joe, it looks like your game of the week that you kind of got highlighted, and I'm excited for this one. Another game at 3:30 on ESPN2. You have number 20 Ole Miss at number 24 Tulane. Ole Miss is a 7-point favorite, over under 63.5. Are you calling your shot here, Joseph?
I am calling my shot here, Beef. I'm going to go Tulane 46, Ole Miss 45. I'm going to take Tulane plus the 7. I'm going to take the over 63.5. I'm calling my shot. The Green Wave are going to pull off this upset on a 2-point conversion late. I think this is going to be a fantastic game. I think it's going to be very high scoring. Tulane controlled South Alabama. Like that's what a top 25 team is supposed to do to a G5 conference favorite. If Tulane had an Alabama sticker on the side of their head, people would be saying how impressive of a win it was for Alabama. Tulane looked really good. I think it got to within 7 points at one point in the third quarter, but they ended up pulling away, winning the game by double digits. And I know Ole Miss probably just scored again on Mercer because they dominated the Bears. That was just embarrassing, looking at that score bug on the bottom. I don't care who you play. When you're scoring, I believe it was 73 points.
73-7, I believe it was.
Almost as bad as 81, which is just disgusting. But I think the Green Wave, have lightning in a bottle right now. And I think this definitely is the biggest home game since they've built their new stadium. Maybe their biggest home game ever, unless, maybe back in like the 60s and stuff, they were having big-time teams come to them. But at least in our lifetimes, Coyle, it's definitely the biggest Tulane home game. Pratt threw for 294 and 4 TDs on just 15 pass attempts. 14 of those were caught. Only one was incomplete. Tulane did have 6 guys carry the ball last week, so the lack of a true dominant RB1 is a little bit of a cause for concern. But honestly, I do think the Green Wave can win this game. If you don't want to take them straight up, I understand. But I think +7 is. If this wasn't a game we were already talking about, this might be my lock of the week. Definitely take Tulane on the spread. I think Green Wave win outright.
Wow. Kmetz calling his shot. Would have been his lock of the week. All right, we'll have to keep tabs on that one for sure. I'll burst the bubble and the Cinderella. I'm going to take Ole Miss here, but I agree with you, Joe. I do like the cover. I'll take Ole Miss 37, Tulane 33. So Tulane +7, over of 63.5. You kind of touched on it. I have it here, the biggest game in Tulane football history. I know we touched on it last week too, but they win this game, Joe. Looking at the rest of that schedule, you agree that they'll be favored the rest of the way, the regular season, as long as there's no major injuries?
Yeah, unless something insane happens, there's no reason why Tulane won't be favored to win that conference.
Yeah, so a potential team to run the table. And then South Alabama, I wouldn't be surprised. We look up in December and they're sitting there at 9-3 at the end of the year, 10-2, and then you have a win over an Ole Miss team potentially that'll probably be in that 8-4, 9-3 range out of the SEC, a 12-0 team. And if the Pac-12 cannibalizes itself, like I'm expecting, the Big Ten maybe some shakeups, there's going to be more chaos at the top this year, I think, in college football. And I think we kind of already saw that with the Clemson game. Tulane could be sitting there pretty at 12-0 and have that outside shot of the playoff, but they have to get this one. Like, this is their Super Bowl, and then they can't have any slip-ups after that. So they really need everything to kind of shake their way. But I do think they're a good enough team, and they're going to be physical enough to kind of compete with Ole Miss. But I do think Ole Miss at the end of the day will be a little bit too much. But that win over South Alabama, a 20-point win, was an impressive performance. Jackson Dart, though, he was the highest-graded quarterback per PFF last week in all of college football in that beatdown of Mercer, where they really just took their pride and their soul from them. But I think that the dangers of this game with Ole Miss is going to be on the ground, led by running back Quinshon Judkins. He's one of the better overall running backs in the country. If Tulane is not able to stop him in the running game, I think Ole Miss has a real good shot to kind of make this one a bit of a blowout. If they're able to force Jackson Dart to go out there and beat him. I know I just said he had a great game last week, but we've seen him be a little bit up and down in his college career so far. If you're able to make this a one-dimensional team, that's where Tulane's going to have their best shot of pulling off this upset. I think it's going to be an awesome environment, an awesome college football game, but at the end of the day, I'm going to go with Ole Miss to pull out the outright win, but Tulane as a +7 cover, and we're going to go over of 63.5. All right, one of the games of the year in college football. Did that episode at the beginning of kind of the offseason or in the summer back in June or July, I believe it was, where I did my top 10 games of the college football season, and I think this was number 2 behind the Ohio State-Michigan game. Number 11, Texas, at number 3, Alabama. Alabama -7.5, over under 56.5. 7 o'clock on ESPN. And say all you want about realignment. If Texas actually is going to be back, if we have a chance to get these two teams matching up in the SEC for the foreseeable future, sign me up for that, because it's going to be a sick atmosphere, I think, each and every year. But this is going to be one of, if not the best non-conference game in the entire season for college football. So, Joe, give me your thoughts on this big-time matchup.
I'm going to take Alabama here 27-24. So I'm going to take Texas to cover. I'm going to take the under 56.5. Even though for some reason I inexplicably had a Michael Scott moment where I just started talking and I ended at Texas is going to win the national title in our week 0 show. Don't really know how I got there, but I predicted them to win the national title this year. I think Alabama's going to pull off the win here. In what could be their biggest non-conference home game ever, maybe? Like, I know they had a lot of big non-conference games that were at neutral sites over the past couple of years, but I don't remember, unless I'm forgetting a very obvious one. Like, this is huge, having Texas come to them. I don't
They
think
played a
Bama's
lot of those like week 1 games. They played like Miami, USC, like Louisville. Those games were all within the past 5 to 6 years. They were all like neutral site games.
Yeah, they were all. The Louisville was so disappointing because that was supposed to be if Lamar stayed another year. And then I think they just like beat Louisville by like 1,000 points. But I don't think the offense is going to look as good as it did against the Blue Raiders. Not really shocking. I do, however, think they're going to be able to play murder ball and show Texas what being on the road in the SEC is going to be all about. Even though I think Quinn Ewers straight up is a better quarterback than Milroe, I think Milroe was the perfect QB for this Bama system this year. I think he's going to be able to control the game. And even though it sometimes seems like an obvious thing to say, I think he, and the QB play out of him is going to be the key here. If he just plays a competent game, Bama is still Bama. Like, Bama's still Bama until Nick Saban leaves, in my opinion. No reason why Bama can't, control this game, which I think they're going to kind of be able to do. I think this game is going to end up being very similar to how last year Bama needed a game-winning field goal. I'm predicting that again. Expect a field goal within the last minute of the game. Bama walks it off. Fans might rush the field. Haven't seen Bama fans get to rush the field in a long time. That wasn't meant to be as bold as it sounded. That just kind of meant to be like they don't get to rush the field very often because they're playing Western Carolina and beating them by 80 when they play at home in the non-conference. So maybe you get a Bama field storm. Who knows? Give me the Tide here.
I'll take the Tide too, Joe, but I like them to win a little bit more comfortably. I'm going to take them 38-28, so -7.5, and the over of 56.5 hitting there. Didn't really watch either of these teams much in week 1, just playing Rice, playing Middle Tennessee, was kind of peeking in on them, but they both, we knew going into it they were going to win comfortably. I wanted to get some better looks at some other teams. So I did kind of some box score scouting on them, and I was glad to see Milroe went out there and played well. I was kind of advocating this all season for him to be the guy there at Alabama, just because I think his ability to hurt teams with his legs and with the lack of overall skill players at the wide receiver and like tight end spot compared to the past few years at Alabama, I think he's the guy that kind of fits this offense best and what they could do. He went out there, he had 5 touchdowns, 3 through the air, 2 on the ground. I just think he is the best guy to run this offense. His legs going to allow the Tide to kind of hurt teams in ways that they haven't in the past few years where they've been really spreading the ball around. We could see that old school smash mouth Alabama team back this year. And it's one of those things too, where Nick Saban, it seems like when everyone else is zigging, he zags. Like, all right, now everyone's going to finesse type offenses, spread it out and whatnot. Now let's get back to just beating up people at the line of scrimmage and running for 200, 300 yards and just dominating up front each and every week. I think they could kind of take it to Texas. Texas loaded at the finesse spots, at the skill spots, but are they up front good enough to compete with Alabama? I don't think so, especially on the road. And another thing was, I feel like Bama heard this all offseason, and Nick Saban has definitely preached this to his team. All that talk about if Quinn Ewers didn't get hurt at the beginning of the game, Texas should have won. And I agree that was a situation, but still Texas had the chance to win down the stretch, and Alabama had some heroics by Bryce Young. I feel like Saban has just kind of preached that into the back of their mind all offseason that everyone thought you should have lost that game. Are you going to let that happen this year when they come to kind of get that redemption? I don't think that's going to happen. I think Bama pushes them around a little bit too much up front, and Nick Saban's track record against his former assistants is pretty unmatched. The fact that Bama's over a touchdown favorite in this one is still going to give me the feeling that they're going to roll in this game. So I think the physical nature of Alabama up front, the beef up front mentality leads to a Bama cover of -7.5 and the over of 56.5, but I do expect a really fun game there. All right, that was our last game of the week. We go into the Dog of the Day segment now. I'll start us off. This is an emotional Dog of the Day bet. It would be really cool just as a football fan, even just as a human being. I feel like it would be a really feel-good moment just for people who love sports. Virginia +7, +230 on the money line at home versus James Madison. Was not a very encouraging performance by Virginia in week 1 against Tennessee. They did start out kind of playing well on defense, but Tennessee exposed them after that. And I know James Madison is one of the better group of 5 teams, but this is the first Virginia home game since the shooting, the tragedy where 3 of their players died last year and they canceled the rest of the season. I believe it was the last game or 2. I expect this to be a very well-attended, very emotional game, and a game that just the entire community, the campus community down there at Virginia, shows out for, and the teammates are going to kind of go and do everything that they can to go win the game for their fallen teammates from the past. So it will be just an awesome thing to see happen, and I'm really rooting for it. So that's why I'm going to take it as my dog of the day, a +230 on the money line at home for a Power 5 versus a Group of 5 team. Sign me up for that value as well, but I'm really rooting for that one to happen.
Yeah, Coyle. I mean, that's one dog, that I saw looking through the slate that jumped out right away. I agree. I think that's a very good pick, especially, the spread there. I'm going to shift a little bit. I'm going to take Texas Tech as my dog of the day. +6.5. They're +215 at home against Oregon. I know Texas Tech had a inexplicable loss at Wyoming. They were up 17-0, and it felt like their controller died, like when you're playing a video game. And Wyoming was able to claw back and win in overtime. Texas Tech is kind of, I hate to use this phrase, but they're it's kind of cliche, like in wounded animal mode. Like if they lose this game and start out 0-2 and they haven't even gotten a conference play yet, all of a sudden McGuire's seat is scalding hot. All of a sudden Texas Tech fans, the sky is falling out in Lubbock. This is going to be a massive game, a huge non-conference opponent coming in Oregon. An Oregon team that some people are predicting to win the Pac-12 and make the playoff and be the Pac-12 representative. This is going to be a huge opportunity for Texas Tech. Wouldn't be surprised they pull off the win here. Definitely will take, the spread, but I feel very confident in this pick for my dog of the day.
This is another one too, Joe. Just like we were saying with Baylor, Utah, if Texas Tech just took care of business, they'd probably be ranked going into this one because this was one of the games viewed as one of the top non-conference games on the college football schedule this year because there were a lot of people, like, they weren't taking Texas to win the Big 12. I saw a lot of names floating around taking Texas Tech. Thought that this could be kind of their breakthrough year. So it's a huge opportunity for them, and still as almost a 7-point dog, I like that at home just because of what they had last year. But can they rebound from that game last week? It remains to be seen. So lock of the week time. I think I might just roll with this team as the lock of the week until it doesn't hit. I'm going to go USC Stanford over of 69. I know that's a large number, but I think at the end of their 12-game regular season, USC this year, they're probably going to be like 9-3 or 10-2 in favor of the over. Taking their overs, you're going to end up on the right side of the bet more than not, especially if Caleb Williams is healthy and back there, and especially if the defense is still struggling to find their footing. I could see this being like a 56 to 28 type game or something, and you cruise to an over. But it's your late night bet too. So if you're down on the day or something, and you want to kind of make up some units back, this is your game to kind of get that money back, I think. So give me over of 69 for the USC and Stanford game.
Yeah, Beef. I mean, there's nothing better than just firing off a late night bet, especially with a team like USC that's they'll score at least 42 to 49 points on their own, no problem. It's just if Stanford's going to be able to come play, and like you said, with USC, with that defense still being what it is at the moment, no reason why that can't hit with ease. I have 2 written down here, but I'm going to end up choosing Kansas State -16.5 versus Troy. This is a Kansas State team. They are really good. They had a lot of guys come back from last year. People forget they won the Big 12. They're kind of using the embarrassment of the bowl game against Alabama to kind of fuel them this season. Troy had a good win, but not great against an FCS opponent. I forget who they played off the top of my head last week. But going into Kansas State, a Wildcat team that is another very trendy pick. Like if you're not going to pick Texas, pick Kansas State to win the Big 12 again. And a team that I think could very well become the top dog in that conference after Oklahoma and Texas do leave. So I'm going to take Kansas State -16.5 at home. The other pick I had written down here, I'm going to throw this out as my honorable mention. Won't count towards the record. But I also love Washington -34 against Tulsa. Yes, it's a big number, but Washington can flat out score. And I think that's just a game it wouldn't shock me if you turn it on and it's like 63-14. Washington's winning that game. So Washington, if you want to also look at that one as well, I think that's a good bet as well.
Yeah, I really like the Kansas State one. I think the best thing with them is they're like a Big Ten team up front, like Michigan or what Penn State's kind of built themselves into. They've got all those physical guys up front. They're not like a Big 12 kind of finesse team. They're going to be able to push Troy around. So I do like that one. And I was looking through the card today as well. That's one I had circled. So, all right, that'll do it for the Week 2 edition of the College Football Show. Hopefully, we're in for as much fun as we kind of got throughout the Week 1 slate and some of what we saw, I guess, in Week 0 as well. But it's just good to have football consistently back on the TV, and then we get some NFL to coincide with that this weekend too. So, as always, everyone, thank you for tuning in. Please like, subscribe, and we'll talk next week.